before we can really dive into the different types of markets, it's really important to spend some time looking at the costs that businesses face. Before we do that, we need to make the important distinction between short run and long run in economics terms. Now, the most important thing is that when we talk about short run versus long run, we are talking nothing about time. Okay, short run versus long run has nothing to do with time. Now, in the short run, at least one resource is fixed. Something used in production of a product is fixed. You're stuck with it. So, for example, let's say that you own a pizzeria, and let's just say you make only pizza. In the short run, the number of ovens you have is fixed. It doesn't change. But let's say you buy, the long run is the amount of time you need to add number of pizzas. The same goes with when you talk about in the short run, your facility, your plant size, it's fixed. The pizzeria place, you're bound by the size of the store you're in. Now, in the long run, nothing is fixed. Right? You can expand or contract your number of pizza ovens or your plant size. Okay, so that becomes really important. So let's first look at production in the short run. Now, we are going to assume two very, very broad classifications of inputs. All right, back to production, what we use to produce the goods and services. Now, in the short run, we are going to assume that this level of capital is fixed. Now, thinking back, capital is going to be basically the machines that you use to produce the goods and services. So, because capital is fixed in the short run, if you want to produce more outputs, you have to increase your labor amounts. You have to, because if the capital you have can only produce so much, and so if you want to do more, you got to bring in more labor. So you're really bounded by the amount of labor that you hire. So when you look at production, the total product, right? So total product, output, Q, they're all basically the same thing. So the total product is the total output that is produced. Okay, it's the total amount you produce. The marginal product of labor, MPL, it's basically the additional output of an additional unit of labor. So when we talk about marginal, which talked about a lot throughout the course, the marginal is the additional amount of X over the additional amount of Y. So it's the additional output from an additional unit of labor. Right. So here we have the marginal product labor is the change in output divided by the change in labor, keeping capital fixed. So the marginal product labor is trying to pin down the additional output you get from an additional unit of labor. Now, if capital was changing as well, the additional output could be from both, and so you couldn't really isolate it. So by saying that capital is fixed, it says that the only thing that's changing is labor. So that's the only thing that could really be causing the output to change. Now, the average product of labor is the output divided by the quantity of labor. It's on average how many units of output is each unit of labor producing. Okay, so let's look at an example of that. So what we have here, Q equals, so we have Q equals a function of K and L. This is called a production function. It's a function that it breaks down the outputs that you get from a combination of inputs. Okay. So, for example, let's say that this production function is quantity equals the amount of capital you have times the amount of labor. So now when we look at this, in the short run, capital is fixed. So we assume that we have 2 units of capital. So let's look at how much output we get from 0 units of labor, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So again, we're saying that the production function is saying that output equals capital times labor. Now, it's not going to be, it's typically not going to be, well, it's not going to be this simple. So when we do that, the amount of capital times the amount of labor. And so when we do that, this is our output. Right? When you have 1 unit of labor, you get no output. Sorry, when you have 0 units of labor, you get 0 output. When you have 1 unit of labor, you get 2. 2, 4, 3, 6, 4, 8, 5, 10. Now, again, the marginal product of labor is the additional output from an additional unit of labor. And so, excuse me, when we look at this, all right, let's see, when we go from 0 units to 1, our output goes from 0 to 2. So change in output, 2, divided by change in labor, 1. The marginal product labor is 2. When we go from 1 unit of labor to 2, our output goes from 2 to 4. So it also goes up by 2, 2, 2, and 2. And if we went through and did the average product labor, which is just the total output divided by the total amount of labor, in this specific case, it's going to be the same. Now, that's not really going to be the case. We'll talk about that a little more. But this is just how you look at the calculations of marginal product of labor, average product of labor. And again, this is only going to be in the short run because you have your capital fixed. So when we come back here now, again, the production function is a function that relates the level of inputs used to the number of outputs. Okay. So when we look at marginal product of labor, which is basically the initial output from an additional unit of labor. Now, it may increase it first, but it typically, I should say, decreases. Without the D. There we go. So, but it typically decreases. All right, here's why. And this is the marginal product, this pinkish line here. So, if you think about it, when you run, so remember that amount of capital is fixed. So let's go back to our pizza kitchen example. If you have 1 person working, let's say that in any given hour, that 1 person who is doing everything is going to be, rolling the dough, putting on the sauce, putting on the cheese, putting on the toppings, putting it in the oven, taking it out of the oven, putting in the box, and giving it to the customer. Right? So let's say that 1 person can make 10 pizzas. Now you hire a second person. Now when you hire that second person, they're combined able to make 22. So 1 person can make 20, 2 people can make 22. And so the marginal product of the first person is 10. The marginal product of the second one is 12. You get 12 additional units of output. Right? So it went up. Why? Well, with that second person, you can now specialize. You can have 1 person who is making the pizza, putting all the sauce, the cheese, toppings, and then they have the other one putting it in, taking it out, putting it in a box, and give it to the customer. Now, when you do that, when you specialize, you can get into more of a groove. You can move through a little bit quicker. So because of that, that by bringing that second person on, they're both able to work quicker. Now let's say you bring on a third one. So you went from 10 to 22, but now when you bring the third one in, 3 of them are only able to produce 30 pizzas. So by bringing the third person in, you went from 22 to 30. So the marginal product of that third unit of labor is only 8. So just kind of summarizing that, the marginal product went from 10 for the first, 12 for the second, 8 for the third. So why is that? Does that mean that the third person was lazy? No. there's this fixed amount of capital. There's still just that one oven. And so because of that, there's only so much they can do. So, they'll be bumping into each other and they have to wait for the pizza to come out. So they can put out, they put in as much as they want, but they can still have waiting in there, so forth. And so in general, yes, the marginal product may initially go up, but it's typically going to be going down. So each additional unit of labor gives you less and less additional output. Right? So that's looking at production in the short run.